Okay, without further ado, I'm so very pleased to have one of our very popular speakers back with us to talk about managing stress and all this stuff that's going on lately. Um, uh, Kristine is going to talk a little bit more about herself, but Kristine Pendy is a licensed clinical social worker and Vice President of Business Development of Vantage Health System. And welcome, Kristine. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone who has signed on today for this very important topic covering our mental health and the things that we can do to manage stress and have positive health outcomes across the board. So my name is Kristine Pendy, and as Susan said, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm at Vantage Health System. Vantage Health System has offices located in both Dumont and Inglewood, and is a community mental health center providing services and care for those in our community. I am also the former CCO, Chief Clinical Officer of Bergen Newbridge Medical Center. So I have both significant inpatient and outpatient experience, and I'm very grateful to be able to speak with everybody today about this topic. So a little bit about what we're going to learn and hear today in the presentation about identifying the different stressors that we are all dealing with in the world today, reviewing some mental health statistics and trends in 2023, as well as identifying coping skills to address the ways to improve our stress management and to really be able to achieve those positive health outcomes. I think it's really important to note that there is no health. There is no physical health without there being positive mental health. So, what's important is to sort of set the stage in this discussion about what we're worrying about in 2023. So when you look at the current statistics, and you'll see that what's listed here on the screen has both what the current statistic is and what it's up from last year. And that gives us a little bit of a sense of what the difference is from 2022 to 2023. Keeping in mind that in 2022 was the first year that we felt that we were coming out of the pandemic of COVID-19, and we're starting to see things returning to normal, whatever that means at this point, and seeing a lot of the precautions that we needed to take reduce themselves so that we had more comfort and more flexibility. But it also created the things, that we're worrying about. And the things that we're worrying about are those things that impact our stress levels. So personal finances up to 64% higher than in the previous year. The uncertainty about 2023, I think we all want to be happy, right? We all want to know that we're coming out of this and return to normal, but there is still those concerns about what is 2023 really going to bring for us. Physical health concerns increased. We do have many folks now who have health related issues to COVID that we didn't have to deal with prior to, let's say, 2020, and we do have to deal with it in 2023. We're seeing an increase in mental health concerns. An increase in how our relationships are with friends and family. We have moved off of the virtual world, the pivot that we took to be able to maintain our relationships. We're back to in person, but we are concerned about our relationships and what they mean now. And we do still have some folks that still have fears of the virus and what could happen, and are still segregating themselves a bit from their community. Job security is at the same for both years. I think in 2022, we kind of were coming out of COVID. And so I'm not surprised to see that that's about the same. Romantic relationships up just slightly. Keeping up the New Year's resolutions is hard for us in any year. So of course, that's something that we're always worried about. And traveling, which is not a big surprise, the concerns about travel have decreased from 2022 as we've seen the world open up and allow for more traveling, the mask wearing and all of the testing concerns that we had prior to 2022. So, what are the societal issues that we're also dealing with that can impact our, mental health issues, anxiety, depression, stress, all related. And so being in touch with what's happening in our world also has an impact. So, political unrest, regardless of your affiliation, concerns about elections, the post-January 6 riots in Washington, D.C., and just right now, the presidential race and candidates who are coming forward to put their name in the hat for, the race to happen between the Republicans and Democrats, independents, and et cetera. We also have, societal issues that we need to be attentive to, things like police interactions, protests, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, union strikes. We have the largest union strike with writers and actresses currently underway. And while that is something that people may not be attentive to and think is really going to impact them, when you drill it down to in the fall and in 2024, what movies are going to be presenting, because movies is something that people missed greatly during COVID and have been very happy to return to, but our return has been rather minimal. And so to go on strike now is really going to impact some of the socialization and comforts that maybe people would do to manage their stress levels. And of course, for our children and for our families, our mothers, our fathers, our caregivers for our children, you're really looking at some of the educational challenges coming out of COVID-19, but also too, there is a great deal of unrest in our society around the type of curriculum that is being introduced in our schools and the discussions around that, which have become quite complicated, challenging, and almost volatile in some of our school board meetings. So I think it's important to set the stage and talk a bit about mental health statistics. And what we see is that our depression symptoms have grown from about 193 million people worldwide to 246 million. So it's about a 28% increase in folks experiencing symptoms of depression. And you can see very similar numbers, about 25% increase for anxiety disorders. This may be not a big surprise to people having come out of COVID-19, but it's important to note that our mental health experiences have been increasing pre-COVID and have just continued and absolutely become a crisis in 2023 for folks to be able to get treatment for mental illness with some of the workforce issues that we're challenged with at this point. So 21% of adults are experiencing at least one mental illness, because you can have more than one at a time. And roughly that equates to about 50 million people. And it's unfortunate to state that about 55% of adults with mental illness have not received any treatment at all for those symptoms that they're experiencing. And a good piece of that has to do with an ongoing movement to reduce the stigma associated to receiving mental health and addiction care in our country. So a survey from Virtual Health Services, which was done by Timely MD, found that about 50% of our college students identify that they have mental health struggles in 2023. And that is one of the top stressors that they're experiencing. And that 71% of those students indicated that those struggles are stress-related anxiety and depression. Unfortunate for our young folks these days that they did go through that 2.5 to 3 year period of time where they were virtual or hybrid and have really experienced a great deal of challenge when they transition to a different level of education, meaning from their elementary school to their middle school to their high school, but certainly for our high school students going to a college or a university. Many of them feel that the experience in high school wasn't the same as it was for folks pre COVID, and that they do feel that they don't have the requisite skills, perhaps that they need, not only from an educational perspective, but also from a socialization perspective. I have two children that are both in college, and my 19-year-old who just completed her freshman year in college was very staunch through COVID, that she would attend school as long as it was available and not be on the virtual platform. She didn't think it was good for her mental health, and I supported that. But when I went to her high school graduation, her superintendent referred to her, she graduated in 2022. They referred to her as the bookend graduates, meaning that their first year of freshman year of high school and their last year of senior year of high school were in person, and their balance in between was virtual. And that's certainly a very challenging experience to then translate into being in college. So all of our students are having some kinds of challenges, and not all. Some are very resilient and able to manage, but some of our children, did not. So an estimated 49.5% of adolescents have had a mental disorder that meets the criteria and received care. And they have very similar numbers, regrettably, to the numbers of children that are experiencing some form of mental health issues or symptoms and are not engaged in some type of treatment service for that. So of adolescents with any mental disorder noted, an estimated 22.2% have a severe impairment. So about 80% of Americans say that they're stressed about the overall cost of living in 2023. So financial stressors being our highest top number, and concerned about inflation. That ties back to the political current effect of our country. And some of the most stressful national issues for Americans are those two. So 80% and 73%. So more than 1 in 4 folks are reporting that they anticipated experiencing more stress at the start of 2023. And that's up from 20% the year prior. At some time, 29% of American adults indicated that they'd adopt New Year's resolutions related to their mental health, which is up 3% from the year previous. So I think what you're seeing is in the trend is that it's also great if we can see the positive in things and the resiliency in things. It's tremendous that we are prioritizing our mental health in a way that we have not experienced in the past. And that the shortfall in the workforce is definitely complicating folks being able to get care at a point when they're finally looking to be able to seek it out. So, what would you say? What would people say was their New Year's resolution in 2023, entering 2023? And so here you see some of the statistics. 65%, as always, would say that they would exercise more. But you see something like meditation, going to see a therapist, 38%, considering a focus on spirituality. This one I found very interesting, 32% taking a break from social media, which we'll talk about. 28% doing something very personal and very important, which is journaling, utilizing their thoughts and pen to paper or computer to be able to really, suss those out and be able to go back and reflect on them. 23% would say that they would use a mental health app. 21% would see a psychiatrist, and 6% said they would try something else, which there's always somebody who wants to try something that's not on the list, and we really support that person. So nearly about 4 in 10 adults reported some type of anxiety or depression in 2021. And we see that kind of slightly going down, in 2023, because I think of the advent of being able to get care and being able to be treated, for those symptoms, now that we have that connection to our mental health being a priority for not only our physical health, but our ongoing overall health as a whole person. So I'd like to talk a little bit about anxiety. Why is anxiety so common in America, what changed. So it's fair to say that no one really seems to have an exact answer as to why it has become so common. Many attribute this presumed increase to, things such as social media, poor sleep habits, lowered stigma. So as we combat the stigma of receiving care and accessing care for mental health, we see that folks are actually comfortable to say that I am experiencing anxiety and that I will go and get treated for it. So you see an increase in those numbers. And of course, and it's something that we always see underreporting in the past. So important to talk about social media, as we look back on COVID-19, as a parent, I can remember going to my pediatrician and having to have to fill out those wonderful forms of how much does your child drink soda and how much does your child spend outside and how much did your child this, that, or whatever. And of course, there was the one of how much time did they spend, with the TV and how much time did they spend. They actually didn't really ask the question they do now about so specifically social media. But what we found during COVID-19 is when we would have answered that question, or maybe we would have fibbed a little bit and said only 2 hours when it was more like 6. What we found through the pandemic is that we really forced ourselves as a world to utilize virtual platforms as our only option for connection. And so we saw the need and the use to grow significantly. And so it is very difficult now to back down from that use and to reintroduce ourselves to getting back to in-person services and getting back to connections with friends and family that are not on an iPad screen or on the phone. Not that we shouldn't do it at all, but it's difficult to manage the difference now because it was something that we tried not to do, then we had no choice. So our Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, warned recently in a 19-page advisory that social media use was posing a profound risk to our children, with excessive use impacting their sleep, their relationships, and causing depression that can lead regrettably to thoughts of suicide. So again, when I think of my own children, my daughter, her senior year, they all were, and this is not a new thing, but they were all posting pictures of their prom dresses. They got to have their prom, whereas the 2 years prior did not. And so they were excited about it. But posting that on social media in a chat group for everyone to comment on and then to make comments to others about was really great if your prom dress was fabulous, but it was not so great if there were disparaging or negative comments that then became food for fodder and created bullying situations. So this is a real challenge for us. Again, the numbers of social media available are significant, and TikTok and Pinterest and all of these apps that come up that sometimes are not healthy and are anonymous are causing our children, again, profound issues and are creating, in many instances, an addiction that is, like it says here, impacting their sleep, impacting their homework skills, and the like. We also see that this reliance on social media and not reconnecting to the world has created for us in 2023 an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. It's been quite underappreciated as a public health crisis that has harmed individual and our societal health. In fact, 50% of our health score, shall we say, our healthiness is impacted by loneliness and isolation. Now, again, we go back to the pandemic, we had no choice, but being able to exit from that and reintroduce has been challenging, and particularly for our children and particularly for our seniors. And so again, the Surgeon General put out a very significant 2023 document out. It's an 87-page document outlining that our relationships and are a source of healing, and that it's well-being for us, and that it helps us to live a healthier life and be more fulfilled and more productive. So given the significant health consequences of loneliness and isolation, it's really important for all of us to prioritize building social connections the same way we prioritize other critical public health issues, such as our tobacco use, combating obesity and substance use disorders. So together we can build a country that's healthier and that we are more resilient, less lonely, and more connected with our friends, our family, those things that we find to be beneficial. So interesting to see that with all of the electronic devices that we have at our fingertips, Murthy spoke to kind of the irony that workers suffer from loneliness at the workplace. So social connection is linked to a 50% drop in risk of early death. Studies show that 40% of wage earners feel isolated at work. Again, we've become so reliant on technology, and particularly for those folks that are home still and perhaps won't return to a work environment, that connection to your colleagues, those creations of relationships and working together have been significantly impacted. Again, I always like to speak to my personal experience. My husband works for a major media outlet and he's been home for 3.5 years. And, you know, there are times that I come home and he's having a full conversation with the dog, and the dog is quite lovely, but doesn't answer back. And I often feel when I come in for work that he really needs that connection and needs to unload, because he's really spent his day working in our home on a computer screen. And while he has interactions on iPads and phones and whatnot, it's just not the same as that interaction that we have when we are having lunch together and going out for a drink or going out after work to the gym, because we've built those connections. So employees who feel they belong are happier, they're healthier, they're more productive. They receive twice as many raises and are 18 times more likely to be promoted, because they learn and have learned, as our children do in school, how to interact and how to converse and how to partner and collaborate with people. And then they also learn how to build healthy relationships. So employees with a high sense of belonging take 75% fewer sick days because they are engaged with their colleagues. And in many ways, they don't want to let them down. And they want to be part of the team. And so it can equate to almost $2.5 million worth of lost productivity each year per 10,000 workers for those who feel excluded, which are fairly staggering numbers, as we are still, you know, in 2023, in what we referenced as a hybrid type of employment situation throughout not only, you know, the United States, but our world. So because of all of this, and quite positively and proactively, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force in June of 2023 decided how imperative it was to start addressing things like anxiety, which is something that leads to significant stress within primary care settings. So anxiety disorders are commonly occurring in mental health conditions. They lead to a variety of different things in terms of diagnostic. But they are often unrecognized in primary care settings. And so years can be delayed in being able to get to the right kind of treatment. And anxiety can be a chronic condition with remissions and recurrences that kind of ebb and flow. But full recovery to any illness is always possible if you're receiving the right treatment. And, you know, that can include talk therapy or groups or self-help, but it also can include medication management. So, you know, according to US data collected from 2021 to 2022, there are, you know, numbers that speak to what it is like for us as adults, for both men at 26.4% and women at 40.4%. Women have a tendency to be more highly diagnosed with anxiety disorders, and generalized anxiety is fairly prevalent throughout pregnancy. If you think through the amount of change that occurs during pregnancy, a change in your lifestyle, a change in who you are as a person, becoming a mother, becoming a parent, and then just the anxieties of having that small, precious life at your hands to care for, and about 10.8% in postpartum depression. So anxiety disorders typically do begin in childhood and early adulthood, and symptoms appear to decline as we age, and as we become more wise and more managing in our lives. So very important to know that we can cope with these stressors in our life. And there are ways that we can adapt so that we can be healthy. So avoiding unnecessary stressors. If you know something about yourself and let's say, for instance, that going into a crowd is a challenge for you and that you're going to be very stressful, you can adjust your schedule around being able to go to things when they're less crowded. Is just one example. If flying, which is an issue for me, is a challenge, you can pick your seat so that it's more manageable for you. And you can also, look at things like deep breathing and mantras and reading and music. And of course, there's always medication as an option. We can alter stressful situations in our lives. And, we all learned a lot through COVID-19. And we've all, I think, in some way reevaluated our world and decided we want less toxic people in our lives, or we want more family contact and friend contact, or we want to go skydiving and things along those lines. So we can alter our lives so that we can reduce those stressful situations and increase those things that bring us joy. And we can also adapt to stress. We, like I said, with the plane, don't want to limit ourselves from being able to fly, but we can develop coping skills for that specific experience. So is it that you don't like to fly, the going up, the coming down, the fear of what could happen, or is it the claustrophobia that you might experience in that enclosed space, and how do you manage that? For me, it is the claustrophobia that I don't love. I can certainly manage. And while I haven't taken advantage of medication interventions, I most certainly deep breathe, listen to music, and I wholeheartedly pick my seat on the aisle so that I have the ability to stand up and walk if permitted, and get out of that seat so that I'm not confined to that one singular space. As you can imagine, I don't fare well when I'm in the middle seat. So I go to pretty great lengths to make sure that doesn't happen for me. And my husband is a really great accommodating guy that if we're in that situation, despite his 6-foot stature, he will take that middle seat on my behalf. And we need to learn to accept the things that we cannot change. And acceptance is something that sometimes is hard to come by, but it is available to us. It is a choice. We have all of this technology at our fingertips, as we discussed. And so being able to educate yourself and understand why things are the way they are, and be able to help yourself make exceptions to certain things and move past certain things, and develop those things that you can't, and how are you going to manage them, are all very productive ways to cope with stress. So, coping methods are very important to us, and some of them are very positive, and some of them can be a bit challenging. When we think about the challenging, it's kind of the good and the bad. Distancing ourselves from a situation that increases our stress level is great. It is one of the things that you can do to manage. But if you distance yourself so greatly that you now isolate yourself and create that loneliness, that is where it is not in our best interest. Confrontation. Sometimes when we are presented with a stressful situation, it can trigger an experience in us where we become confrontative about that situation. That is something that can be challenging. And, we really need to think through. And this is a time where we want to manage our behavior so that we can self-control, as it says below, but also to know what our limit is, and again, develop some coping skills like deep breathing, walking away, returning to the situation. Seeking support, that's not just seeking clinical care, but also it's seeking the support of friends, families, and significant others who we can talk through stressful and challenging situations and really develop that as a coping skill for something that we're having a struggle with. Accepting responsibility, problem solving, very positive interactions for us and interventions for us. positive reappraisal, kind of looking at something and saying, let me relook at the situation and find the positive. I speak to my mom pretty regularly as a senior, actually on a daily basis. She lives in another state, and we're constantly talking about the difference between my glass is consistently full and my mom's glass is consistently on the half empty to empty side, and kind of trying to reframe what our experiences are so that we can see the silver lining and we can look at the good rather than only focusing on the negative. And then of course we can always escape and we can always avoid situations that we just don't have the coping skills for and we feel are going to cause that stress. But you want to be able to look very closely at those and be attentive to make sure that they're, again, not limiting your interaction with folks and then triggering perhaps depression and loneliness and the like. So important to know some of the tips to manage and reduce stress. And there are a lot of them out there, but using guided meditation, again, that practice of deep breathing. I can remember back in the day being like, deep breathing, okay, I got to tell you, it really does help tremendously. There are just new things that we can do. It's really about self-care and whatever that means to you. I'm not what you would reference as somebody who likes massages or sort of that girly girl kind of stuff. That's just not my cup of tea. But I have to say of recent, with some stressful events in my experience, getting a facial, while I don't like massages because I don't enjoy being touched in that fashion, it's not my thing. Getting a facial and feeling really good about my skin and the health of my face and reducing, different things that I'm experiencing, especially as we age, has really proven to be a tremendous stress reducer for me. So there's not a set prescribed thing that you should do, but when you look at, practicing deep breathing and, maintaining physical exercise and good nutrition, what does that mean to you? There's lots of stuff out there about what good nutrition is. There's lots of stuff out there about physical exercise. But I can tell you that, coming home from work and taking the dog for a walk for, a 2 or 3 or 4 block radius, while isn't probably taxing from a cardio physical exercise perspective, it is absolutely a stress reliever for me. I enjoy spending time with Maverick. We watched too much Top Gun during the pandemic and then got a puppy, which I had said no to for many, many moons. And now my daughter's in college. But, this proved to be very stress relieving, especially when I was working at a hospital and, was dealing with COVID on the front lines. That was very satisfying to me and really made a difference in my stress level. And certainly deep breathing through those walks to kind of process what the day had been like and really relinquish it to what I can't control was really tremendous. I can't say that I'm very, very, very much so into guided meditation or that spirituality, but I have to say that I know a lot of folks that have great value that they see in this. And I've really grown to greatly appreciate this for them and have started to think about it even for my own self. So, it's never too late to be introduced to a new stress reliever that will help you manage what's happening for you. We talked about in the beginning of the presentation about, the unhealthy use of social media. So, really managing that time. Nobody, in my opinion, can tell you, if you do 2 hours, you're good. You need to think about, what's happening for you in your life and what are you missing while you're on social media. I see my daughter, I see her friends, the amount of time that they spend on TikTok, I think is astronomical. I'm not a TikTok person. I actually resist going on it because I understand that it's quite entertaining and that there's so much that you can post on it, but I see the negative opportunity. So you have to really think about what is it and how much time can you dedicate to something like that, Because if it starts to impact your daily functioning, you're late to work, you're late to see friends, you're not going out for that walk with the dog, and you're not doing some things that you normally would do because you are on Facebook, on TikTok, and tweeting. This is where it can grow into really a problem and an addiction, and then it becomes something that's very, very difficult to give up. And you know, again, coming out of that pandemic, it is not now in 2023 the only way that we can connect with people. Throughout the pandemic, I was blessed to reconnect on Zoom, as many of us did, with about 25 of my high school friends. We were always very close, but moved to different areas of the country. And I can tell you now that, you know, in 2023, you know, we do still have an occasional Zoom or whatnot, but those bonds that we created in COVID again and reintroduced to ourselves are maintaining themselves with visits and pictures of, I saw this one and I saw that one. So we're reconnecting. So it's not that you can't do it virtually, it's that you have to manage that and make sure that it is a stress reducer for you. So I think it's so important for us to talk about resilience and what it means. So a psychologists define resilience as a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, significant sources of stress, such as family, relationship problems, serious health problems, workplace, and financial stressors. So I think it's fair to say that as a world, we have been through these adverse moments. And unfortunately, as we watch the TV and we see the mass shootings, school shootings, and the impact of some of the things that we see in the media, we are, you know, certainly meeting the need to be resilient and adapt to these things that we have to face as we go through life in 2023 and as our children go through life in 2023. But we have to remember that we are resilient and that resiliency is possible. So when you look at a great graphic like this, resilience is about focusing on positives and flexibility, endurance, learning, hope, defense, pressure, change, growth, all of these great words, empowering, empowerment, being agile, getting through the impossible, growing. I certainly think that as a nation and as a world, we can say that we have done this through 2020, 2021, 2022. And I think as a world, many of us hope not to return to that. But we have to focus on the strength and the positives of what we have learned and how we got through that and how resilient we are as a world. And again, it's that conversation about your glass being half full or full and not being half empty and only focusing on the negativity. So what are examples of being resilient? You know, viewing a setback as an impermanent moment. It's just something that happened and I'm going to move past it. Reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth. Recognizing cognitive distortions or as false beliefs, right? So just because somebody thinks that doesn't mean it is that. You have to make those decisions for yourself. Managing strong emotions and impulses, focusing on events you can control. Not seeing yourself as a victim and committing to all aspects of your life, being able to see all parts of you and not seeing that because something's not going well in your personal life or something's not going well in your professional life, that at the end of the day, you know, everything is terrible. Really focusing on those silver linings and using those to continue to move in a forward trajectory and see the good in what you've gotten through and see the good in what is in front of you. So what's more resilient than this picture? It's important to note that even in the most challenging of situations that seem like in many ways we can't get through them, we can't get past them, that all it takes is a little crack in the pavement for this beautiful, perseverant, and resilient flower to be able to find the space to grow and bring light and color and positivity to whomever took this picture. Thank you to the internet, and, allowed this flower to be, depicted for us to look at and say, how resilient we are as a nation and as a world, how resilient each of us are as individuals and our families and our children, and that we have persevered. And it's all depicted in that beautiful, beautiful lilac purple flower. So, you have to give a little bit of thought of, who would we indicate, or who would I indicate in society has the greatest resiliency? And I think we should all know, I hope we all realize, it's our children. And why? Look at what they went through COVID-19. They missed school for 2 to 3 years. They missed those formative moments in time. Maybe their experiences, they're a little bit behind in their education due to being on the virtual platform, and socially they didn't create the connections that, children are formative and they're learning. As we become adults, we become a little bit more set in our ways and deciding what we will be exposed to, and decisions we've made in our lives that sometimes we feel are moving us forward in that trajectory positively, or are unfortunately, holding us back and causing those negative feelings. But our children are a vessel, and they're learning all through those formative years, and they are amazingly resilient. They're tech savvy now. They've returned to in-person education without choice, where maybe some of us as adults can say, I'm not comfortable going back to work, or I'd still like to be hybrid. I appreciate the ability to drop my kids to school and jump on a Zoom call and pick them up from school and jump on a Zoom call because I can set my schedule. But those kids went back to school, many of them, some colleges still a little bit here and there, but many of them without choice are back in school. And so they had to deal with those fears of the virus, many of which, a lot of the stressors that our children are dealing with, we have to remember, are often from family, are often from their parents, because they're in the home and they're seeing that there's stressors over jobs, or there's stressors over financial. We're seeing them watching the same media that we're watching, and we need to be cognizant of them, and again start reducing that time, taking a break from the media, remembering to have those conversations privately, because we want our children to continue to grow and flourish, and they are the epitome of resiliency. But they pivoted in a way that we all tried to pivot and we did well, but they pivoted amazingly, and they are resilient. But we need to pay very, very close attention. As we know, in our world today, our society is without question in a post-pandemic mental health and substance abuse crisis. And for our children, that is real. So as clinical providers, we are every day seeing more and more folks coming for mental health care and addictions care, folks we've had not seen before with significant issues because they had stayed at home and didn't get care, and because they were embarrassed and all of those things. And, we have to pay very, very close attention that our children are at risk. And we have them in these virtual worlds that we're trying to pull them back from. And there's a lot of things that happen in those virtual worlds that we can't control. So we really need to pay very, very close attention to our children and keep them healthy, because as we've seen them return, we have seen these increases in anxiety, increases in depression, bullying. There's a lot happening in our world. They're young, they don't process at the same level that we do as adults. So we really have to take that time to explain what's happening and to have fair and honest conversations with our children, because they're gonna see it anyway. I am amazed at what my children know that I don't know about something that happened yesterday. They are tuned in, but it has its downside. So, please pay attention to the children, of our world and the children in our lives. It's okay to ask them if they are okay. It is okay for them to say they are not. It is okay to seek out and gain care for some of the issues that may present. And it doesn't have to be a lifelong pursuit of long-term care, but it can be something that is episodic, and that they get the help that they need and they see themselves, back in another place. I have a cousin who, as a young person, she's in her 40s now, but as a young person, was very challenging to deal with. She was the third of three daughters. And, she got kind of that tag of being that difficult child, and they nicknamed her Monster. And I have to say that it stuck. And it really caused a lot of challenges for her as she went to college and became an adult. And, now she has children of her own. And she was able to seek out, medication for some of the challenges that she was experiencing, and reflect back and say, like, if I had known this, if only my mother and my father had known that getting me to that care would have really saved her a lot of challenges that she experienced because she didn't. So pay attention to your children and the children in your area. Pay attention to what they're talking about, and see if we can't, keep them moving forward in resiliency and getting past and through the challenges that we're experiencing in our nation. So I'm very grateful to have been able to present this to you. I hope that you found the information beneficial. As Sue said, she will open up the floor in the chat for any questions that I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so very much, Kristine. It was just a wonderful presentation, and it's a lot of food for thought, and it's a lot of things to think about. It truly is. We find very often when I work with people, it's a lot easier to discuss physical health and ailments, even though they're, can be very debilitating. Mental health stuff is very tricky. And I love what you said about resiliency. And we are resilient. There's a lot of hope out there.
Yes.
And I just have to add that I do think that, this has been an opportunity to know ourselves better and just check in with ourselves. What are we feeling? It can be a matter of life and death, and it's not a big deal. And, so often, and I'll end with this, but, I think that it's very easy to be tough on ourselves and others,
Yes.
Not in my day, we didn't get so upset. Well, it's different now, and that's okay. Be compassion to yourself and others. It really makes life better. So
most certainly different.
Right, it's definitely different, and little changes count. So thank you. At this time, I just think people are probably really taking it all in and thinking, if anyone does have questions in the future, you're certainly feel free to email us, or of course, Kristine, or even us at Community Health, and we'll pass on that information. And thank you again, Kristine. I'm just going to wrap it up here, and just again encourage, if you have time, to take the survey using the SurveyMonkey link. We do have other events coming up this summer and of course in the fall, and you can check out and find out what's going on via www.valleyhealth.com/events. And again, if you want to rewatch this wonderful presentation, you can go to www.valleyhealth.com/tune-into-health. Okay, be good to yourselves. And Kristine, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Be kind.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.